And my cat is talking in the background. But nevertheless, when you start to speak to other people that are going through stuff that you are going through in a toxic work environment, it's really hard to get some sound thinking. You're both in an emotional state. You're both maybe going through similar things with toxic boss in a narcissistic workspace, and you're just trying to figure it out. So when you're talking to others, you may not be getting the answers that you're looking for, right? And that can be, if I quit, then what? You know, there's questions you have to ask yourself. You know, one of the first questions is, what is in my control? A second question is, what can I influence? How can I make things different? And a third one is, what's outside of my control? This is important because it allows you to sit and reflect instead of being in emotion, right? See, the emotion, should I quit my job? You want to quit. And if you're in emotion and an emotional state, you will put your financial situation at risk, right? And if you're thinking about this question, hi, nice to see you, Fabian. Thank you for coming in. And I see our men as well. So the question is, should I leave my toxic job? The first thing I want to say is, ask yourself the question, what's in my control? What's outside of my control? And what can I control, or what can I influence? I'm telling you, if you sit down and you reflect and you start to answer those questions, you start to get more closer and closer to the answer, right? And then you might think to yourself, well, if I leave my job, one of the questions is, do I have enough money sitting in the bank to give me time to kind of recover after being in a toxic environment? Because get this, a toxic environment creates a certain level of career trauma. Okay. And that's what you're dealing with. And it's like you go into the job, you're feeling more and more of that angst and that anxiety. And that's what being in a toxic environment creates. It creates high levels of anxiety. Cortisol starts to flood your body. You go into a fight, flight, or freeze response. Sometimes you want to argue, you want to cuss somebody out. Sometimes you just don't want to even show up, or you just want to leave because you're so sick and tired. Your lunch break comes and you're probably like, you sitting in your car and you're like, I just want to get the heck out of here. Have you felt like that? Give me a thumbs up if you felt like that before. You just want to get away from that boss. Give me a thumbs out. Let me know. Let me know that you're with me, right? There's a lot that goes on. There's a lot that goes on in this decision making process. You can't just make decisions. I'm based out here, Saheed. I'm based out here in Dallas, Texas. Lived in the UK for 30 years. Back in America after all that time, only a year in Dallas, Texas. So anyway, thanks for asking. Put where you're from. I'd love to know where you're from. I hear you in the gym. I see you in the gym. Great. And that reminds me, sometimes we're so caught up in all the drama at work, we stop taking care of ourselves, right? If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be in a fit state to make these emotional decisions anyway. You won't have a plan because you're in an emotional state. And that is the time where you have to sit down and ask yourself those questions. What's in my control, out of my control, and what can I influence? And then beyond that, so that's what we call reflective work. You're reflecting, right? You're thinking before you make decisions. You're coming up with what's going on internally. You start to see where you're at in your life, right? The next thing that you want to do before you make the decision of quitting your job and you determine that you definitely cannot stay, you cannot influence anything to be different, you realize that you just can't stay there anymore. Well, before you leave, you must get your house in order. And what's your house in order mean? Your house in order means you need to look at that resume. You need to update your resume. A lot of times people will be at a job 1, 3, 5, 10 years, and they've not updated their resume or their CV. They've not updated it. So that has to be one of the first priorities, right? Let me see how my resume looks. Let me go in here and work on it, tweak it, update it, And then whilst you're doing that, you also want to go over to your LinkedIn and making sure that that update of your resume is reflected on your LinkedIn profile. Do you have a new photo on your LinkedIn profile? If you're still having a LinkedIn photo that looks like you were, you just finished college, but you finished college 8 years ago, it's an old photo, it's not a proper representation or a true representation of who you are today. So you want to make sure it has a very neutral background or a solid color background, not too messy in the background. Show a little bit of personality, show the smile. Be mindful of glasses. I wear glasses too. The downer about, like when I put on my glasses, look at that. You get a bit of glare. The same thing happens when you take a photo, right? So you want to be careful of that. Show the whole of your face, so people know you when you have an interview. So they see it's the same person that they saw your LinkedIn. And trust and believe, they're checking your LinkedIn. Happy birthday to me. It's my birthday, says Kaysen. Well, happy birthday to you from me. I'm KK. Nice to have you sitting in here. I hope you have a wonderful birthday year. Okay. As you get older, you begin to celebrate your birthday all year long. At least I do. So back to, you're welcome, back to what you should be doing before you quit that job, right? So you're at your LinkedIn. Is your LinkedIn up to date? I was wonderful. Oop, I just kicked my camera. Is your LinkedIn up to date? Is your resume up to date? Now, if you don't know about how your how your resume or your LinkedIn should read, it should really showcase the achievements you've made at all those jobs that you've had, right? It shouldn't just be job duties, right? These days, if you're applying for a job and you have a list of job duties on your resume, then you're not using that resume space. They may call it resume real estate. You're not using it well, okay? You must use that with achievement statements. You could use ChatGPT, but there's a way to use ChatGPT so your resume isn't generic. Okay, if you're leaving a toxic environment, then when you go over to ChatGPT, you must give it as much information about the things that you did, the achievements. If it's quantifiable, you save the time, you save money, etc. You really have to tell the story. A lot of people use ChatGPT wrong. If you'd like me to create a video on how to actually use ChatGPT in the right way that's going to actually get you an interview, then say yes down in the chat. If you're on the replay, say yes, and I will see that. If it's one of you, I will see that, and I will make a video or do a live presentation for how to actually create a resume that gets hits, meaning the interviewer wants to meet you or the hiring manager wants to meet you, because ChatGPT has a tendency to just crank out the same generic statements. So if you want that, type a yes down below, and then I'll make that video for you. We'll do it live. So we've got LinkedIn, we've got the resume, we've got some personal questions that you should be asking yourself. You should be asking yourself around, what's in my control? Can I control this environment? If you can, meaning say you can get a new job, right? Within the same company. If you can do that, aim to do that first, right? That way you can just position it as you're looking for growth. You're looking for growth in the business, and you want to try out something new. That's how you can position it. If it's not, you're still just not in a great position, you could speak to HR. It just depends on if your HR is very supportive or not, right? So another thing you should be thinking to yourself, am I ready to leave this job? And if not, what can I do to kind of distract me away from this toxic noise that's all around me, right? What can I be doing on the side so I can build something for myself? A lot of people on YouTube, they realize there's an opportunity here on YouTube. You can build a side income. You know, all it takes is consistency. And I've been doing that, being a bit more consistent with my YouTube. And you can build something based on your skill set, right? If you are, say, a program manager, you're really good at that. You're in a toxic work environment too. You know, you can package that, your program management skills, right? Maybe you ace the program, what is it called, the PMP test, that you take. Maybe you aced it. Maybe you can teach people what they need to be looking out for when they take that program manager test, right? You could be helping people along. You might get a lot of views on that. You know, if you're having to sit in these toxic environments, you must also protect your mental health, you know? So how do you protect your mental health? Well, if you have benefits in at the job you work, find out what their psychological support looks like. Do they have some mental health support? A lot of companies offer that. Some don't. If they don't, and you have medical insurance, you should see someone and talk to them about your mental health. If that's one way to do it. You may have to look, if you don't have any medical insurance, if you don't have any availability for your mental health at your job, then my suggestion is that you start to read, you start to watch these videos. You can come back to my videos and just learn how to start to protect your mental health. Now, as an executive coach and a psychologist, and who talks about toxic work environments, narcissistic bosses and organizations, I am leaning heavy on solutions. How do I maneuver or navigate in these workspaces that are filled with this toxicity, right? And so if you want, you can keep coming back to my channel to discover how. My lives is where I'll be bringing content for you. If that sounds good, please also put yes down in the chat if you're on the replay, or just give me a thumbs up as you're on here. So we've got a few things that you can be doing to determine if quitting your job is the right thing. This is what I want you to also remember, that your mindset has to be ready to go out there and interview for a new job. If you're not ready, if you're still angry and your confidence has been eroded, then you might be setting yourself up for disappointment. Well, why would KK say that? Well, believe it or not, we do exude a certain energy when we feel so down, right? When a toxic job has eroded our confidence, we will exude that energy. Might be down, just not yourself. You go to an interview and you're just not connecting with the hiring manager. You're not being your best self. Well, that's because that toxic work environment has knocked you. You understand? It has knocked you for six, as the saying goes. And, you know, that is where you have to do some work. I don't want you or anybody to go for a job when they've not kind of healed from the pain of this last job that they've had where it's a toxic boss, right? It is so important, my friend, that you begin to restore your confidence, to mentally release yourself from that environment. You know, a lot of people say, oh, document everything. Anytime your boss says this and that, your narcissistic boss says this and that, document it, follow up with an email, and all of that is good. But I'm going to tell you something. These bosses know what y'all doing. They know that you're keeping a trail. They do. They know you're keeping a paper trail. They're not stupid. They're watching YouTube. They're watching TikTok. They're seeing what people are talking about in the career space. Narcissists are so freaking calculating. A narcissist is so calculating, right? They are plotting and planning on how to get over on you. And especially the ones who don't want to do any work, and they're taking your credit. These narcissists, they don't want to do any work and take your credit. They are strategically paying attention to what people are saying on the internet so they can make sure they don't get caught, because they're cunning. They are cunning. They don't mean you any good. They really don't. They're takers. They take, 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 take. That's what these narcissists and toxic people are. The toxic ones are a little bit different from the narcissist ones. You know, the toxic ones, they just love to just spread gossip. They just love to just, bully. They just love to talk mess, right? They just love to see you fail. This is what these toxic ones are about, but as soon as things come their way, they will be like trying to be all buddy buddy when they've been doing you, talking bad about you behind your back, right? But now all eyes are on them and they're in trouble. Now all of a sudden they're your buddies. We know toxic people like that. Please give me a thumbs up. I see you in the room. We know toxic people like that, don't you? Do you know toxic people like that? They will sit there and talk about everybody at work. Everybody at work. And if they're talking about everybody at work, you best believe they're talking about you too. Nobody's off limit when it comes to toxic people, because those toxic people, they got issues. They got issues. I mean, some chicken salad. I ain't thinking about you. It gives them a thrill. Those people who, when something goes down, they're the first person to run to somebody else. When somebody's getting dogged out, they're the first person to run to somebody and be like, "Oh, did you know this is happening to so and so?" And it's like it brings them joy. Those are the type of toxic people. See, they are the ones who spread the stuff, and those toxic people, they're the ones that the narcissist likes. Right? They like them because they can whisper and say, "Well, did you know this?" And they can turn groups of people against that one person. Somebody's getting bullied at work. It seems like everybody's turning against. You have the narcissist who's running the show, and then you have the 1 to 2 toxic people who love a bit of gossip. They love it. So he whispers in their ear or she whispers in their ear, and then they go and they just make the virus spread. That's what toxic professionals are like, right? Toxic people at work. Those are the kind of people I cannot stand. And they usually will run to me. Because they're like, "Oh, KK's nice. Sorry, I hope you're eating your lunch too. Or your dinner." Right? Those people are like the worst. And they will come to me 1 to 2 times, but then they kind of realize, "Oh, KK don't really spread gossip, so we can't really. I'm not gonna go to her. I gotta get somebody that co-signs on this with me." That's what they be doing. A co-sign. They looking for people that can do the narcissist bidding. They're always trying to get on the good side of the narcissist. You got to know what's going on around you. You got to name it. If you're thinking about leaving your job, you got to be smarter than them. Get your house in order. The outdoor market, when I talk about jobs outside, it is difficult right now, but it doesn't mean that there's not a job there for you. It may be difficult, but if you got your house in order, in the UK we say get your ducks in a row. You get your ducks in a row, you will land something, but you just got to be patient. You got to be strategic. I was watching Diary of a CEO yesterday, and there was this big wig investor guy, and very, very successful, like billionaire successful. And very nice man, but he was talking about a numbers game, right? The more applications you put out, you increase the likelihood of getting hired, right? So if you've only put out 2 applications in 3 weeks, well, your chance is like hitting the lottery. But if you put out 20 applications, the numbers start leaning towards your favor. You put in 40, you put in 50, it starts leaning in your favor. That's just math. And when he broke that down, I was like, oh my God, these 4,000 hours that I want to reach this year is a math game. If I can just show up here every day and add value and get 5, 10 people to stay with me on the live, I could hit those 4,000 hours of view time that YouTube requires. See, I want to get out of my work environment. I don't want to be working like this for the rest of my life. We all want to be free, but we have to do this thing strategically. For me, because I have a 9 to 5, I am happy at my job. It's not that I'm not happy, right? But it's just simply that I want a different lifestyle. My daughter lives in the UK. I have been living in the US for a year now. I want to be able to travel with a lot of freedom, right? Still work, but do it in a different way. But it didn't come by me sitting still and not doing what it takes in order to reach those goals. You see? Write it down. Answer those questions. What's in my control? What's in your control is getting your house in order, getting your resume done, getting your LinkedIn looking nice, connecting with the network on LinkedIn, updating your resume when you see a job that you like. You got to tweak that resume. This is getting your house in order, my friend, before you go off and leave a job, right? And then there's the mindset piece, either finding a coach, and who works with people who go through work trauma, career trauma, a therapist if it's through your job's benefits or your benefits. Start to work on yourself. Start to see a future where you are happy. You also have to do that. Start to see a future where that job that you really desire, an environment that you really want to be in, one that's with people who are just decent to one another, a decent boss. People may get moody and things like that, but overall, is that boss a decent boss? That's the kind of vision that you want to set for yourself, a future for yourself, right? Connect with what you want. I was working with the client today, and I said, let's turn the camera off. We turned our cameras off, and I told him I wanted him to write down what that job he wants and what it looks like. How far is it from home, right? Does it have enough the benefits that you need for you and your family? Really to capture within yourself what you want the job to look like, the money, the salary that you want it to look like. Is it a long drive, short drive, train journey, short train journey? What is it? I see somebody else gave me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you if you're still in the room with me. My name is KK, executive coach and psychologist. So I sat with him and virtually, and I just had him do this exercise. And when we came back into the virtual room together, and he started to list, and he started to become very, very granular. I like that saying, to go down into the granular of what you want. Because when we are specific about what we want and what we desire, then when we go to look for a job, we won't sit there wasting time reading a job that is not what you're actually looking for. How many have you done that before? I've done that before. I've sat and read a whole job description when the first thing they said, you must have been an executive for 10 to 15 years at an organization in a leadership role. I had not been that, so why did I carry on reading that, right? Like it was just going to be some magical thing that there was going to be everything else that I fit. No, we write it down so we are specific. So again, when we are searching, we use our brain, we use a filter, which is called the reticular activating system. We use that filter to filter out what we want. This is brain. This is neuroscience. This isn't just made up, make believe, right? Be specific about what you want. If you've not done all of these things, if you're not doing all of these things, then you are going to leave from an emotional perspective. You're going to be sitting there on unemployment if you get that in your country, wherever you're from. And it's going to be far less than what you probably make. And you'll find yourself out of a job, out of the running for a job. Okay? Because when we don't have our house in order and we're under the stress of trying to find a job to pay those bills, then we're not going to approach our resume, our LinkedIn, or anything from a place of calm and being reflective. Now you just chasing. Now you just chasing. You're taking your credit card payments. You're paying Peter to pay Paul and all of that. So you're not even focused on what will get you a successful job. You'll take anything. You'll take anything. If you don't get your house in order, you will take anything. I've seen it. I've seen people lose everything. I know someone recently, very, very, very recently, she lost everything. And I thought to myself, thank God she did have her house in order, but there were some areas that it was more to do with the mindset. She hadn't worked on her mindset. You got to work on your mindset, especially if you've been in a toxic environment, because that toxic environment has gotten into your head. Trust and believe these bastards. These are people that make organizations narcissistic. And don't let me get started about these organizations. They know exactly what they're doing. When you have the likes of these guys making billions and close to $1 trillion, and they treat their people not as partners who help them make this money, but as minions. That is what we're dealing with. When organizations overwork you and they then tell you, oh, we don't have enough staff to do that job, but we have the expectation that you're going to be able to do two people's job. And they'll say, oh, and then they'll give you what, $500 at Christmas, $1,000 at Christmas. Shoot, even $5,000 at Christmas ain't nothing, because it's going to get taxed. I know your pain. I know that's why you're thinking, should I quit my toxic job? I know. And I think you are wise to think that way. You are wise to think that way. But we must have some things in place. We must think this thing out. You want to be asking yourself, do I got at least 3 to 4 months of money in the bank? That every bill in this apartment, this house, is taken care of. That's the question. Do I have it stacked away? And if you don't, hold tight. Get your house in order so you can start interviewing sooner than later, right? So this whole thing isn't about, I'm just going to stay in this toxic job. No. You're going to get your house in order. For you that just joined me, you're asking yourself that question. What's in my control? What's out of my control? What can I influence? Can I influence anything like this to change? If I can't, then what's in my control? What's out of my control? If I can't control how these people behave, I can choose to control how I respond to it. I can also, what's in my control is getting my resume looked good, my LinkedIn look good, and focusing in on my network and having conversations with people. That's what's in my control. I can cut my spending if you can. If you can cut your spending, then there you go. That's in your control. Can I stack some cash so I can last 3 months, 4 months, 5 months? Because trust and believe, you've been dealing with it this far. And if it means you just got to suck things up for a little longer, trust me, you can do it. You can do it. Because I don't want to see like the emotional impact, not having the money in the bank, not having a job to walk straight into. I don't want you to deal with the emotional impact, the psychological impact. And if you have children, your children will deal with that psychological impact. And if you have a partner where you guys share the household expenses, because look, most of us do have to do that. Most of us, if we're in partnerships, have to lean on each other and take care of a home. That's a fact. It's 2025. You see, the cost of everything is outrageous. So I need you to lean into therapy. If you can get some therapy, if you can talk to someone, a coach, you can talk to them. What benefits do you have that would allow that? And if not, find a good channel here on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel. I will be going live at least 3 days a week, 3 days a week, and bringing some real solution focused content that you can use and activate in your life, right? So you're not making rash decisions. Also, so you know what's going on in your brain, why you can't kind of let go of certain things, what's going on psychological with you, coming up with solutions that will help you move forward. I'm going to be doing a live in the next day or two. Tomorrow's Saturday, but the next day or two, I'll be doing a live, or Monday, I'll be doing a live. And it will be on kind of building out a side hustle, and not just anything, but building out a side hustle based on your talent. If you've been giving all your time to an organization and you are good at what you do, I'm sure you have skills inside of you that other people would love. So I'm going to be teaching people how to write a book. I've gone number one. I've been a bestseller on Amazon, and it changes my life. I had this woman say to me today outside, and she said, "Thank you so much for your book." She said, "I just read it all the time." She says, "I'm reading." And I said, "Look, I think it's chapter 6." I said, "Go to chapter 6 and look at what's going on in your brain so you can get mentally prepared, mentally strong. You can't do these big jumps without being mentally strong." She was so happy. She cried. I got all choked up. I know I've been talking quite fast, but that's my pace sometimes. But I sit and I watch channels like Diary of a CEO, and I watch other ones like Tom Bilyeu, Bileyu or something. I watch these channels and they are saying it. There are warnings that are coming out. What's to come is not good for the regular everyday people. It's not. We must be wise in our decision making. We must be wise in our decision making before we make rash decisions. Now, somebody say, "Well, I'm just going to pray. I'm going to have faith that I'm going to get a job." And I want you to do that. But I think God would want you to have your house in order before you make a rash decision that could cost you your emotional well-being even further than that toxic job. Because let me tell you something, when you're in these toxic environments, they have your head tripped out to the point where you start to believe that you aren't as talented as you are. And trust me, it is manipulation by these people. They want to keep you in there doing that job, because most of you doing the job, you're doing a good job, and that's why they will use you. They don't use people who don't do good jobs. They just don't. Why would you do that? I ain't gonna work with somebody who take something from somebody who ain't got nothing to take. I'm not gonna do that. And you got to understand, if you got to build your confidence back up, keep coming to my channel. Because I will remind you who you are. We all have talent. And a lot of times you go into these workforces for the first time and you realize, oh my God, they're using people. They're abusing people. They're firing people with no notice. How can people at a company do that to another human being? Don't quit your job. Not before you get your house in order. There's not going to be a big old "thank you so much for your service." That's a talking point. That's ideal. They're not going to miss you. They will have your colleague do all your work, make their life hell before they hire someone else right away. Or they'll hire someone else right away who they will promise the world to, love bomb them and make them feel great. And then very quickly, once they determine that that person's a hardworking individual, they will take that person's credit, make that person's life hell. I have known companies to overwork people to near death, and I'm just like, not joking. People ended up in the floor in the bathroom because they weren't drinking enough water. Kidney infections, bladder infections, because they're trying to keep up with the load of this toxic boss is giving them. Yeah, I've seen it. These people they're ending up in hospital. They come back to work the next day, and the boss doesn't send them home and say rest. They say, "Oh, are you sure?" They don't give a damn. How you gonna end up on the floor and your boss doesn't send you home? These are toxic work environments with toxic narcissistic people who are more concerned about themselves and getting the job done so they keep their bonus whilst you suffer. You understand? So don't leave just like that. Get your house in order, find you a new job, and then give them the finger and tell them to F off. Of course, in yourself, because we don't want anybody to have any negativity follow them onto the next job, because at the end of the day, we do have to work, don't we? We do have to pay our bills, don't we? But within yourself, and every time you're plotting and planning, you got your house in order, you got your resume together, you got your LinkedIn, I'll just be visualizing the next place, what it's going to give you, what kind of environment you're going to be in. Because I'm going to tell you, when you go into these interviews, you'll be able to see any red flags, but you'll also be able to see the green flags that says, yes, this is safe, because you know what you're looking for. Also, write down everything that you're looking for. Leave no stone unturned. You must. And again, we're using the brain. You were using the brain, and we're using its ability to start to look for those things that we want. Right? That's what we're using. We're using our brain. Our brain is like neuroplastic. You can train it. Right? You create these new neural pathways. You can train it to see what you're looking for, to be able to identify it. And this is no joke. This is no joke. When you start to understand the workings of your mind, you will realize some of that stuff. When people talk about the law of attraction and all that, you will understand why it works for some people, because, well, they start to understand the power within themselves, especially the ones like, what's his name, Dr. Joe Dispenza. He starts to really understand the brain and what we're capable of. And so he's been able to create the life he wanted, to be able to work with as many people as possible. So that's what I want you to have. Understand how your brain works just a little bit. I'm not a neuroscientist. I understand a little bit of how it works. And that's power. That is power. When I understand the power that's in me, that toxicity, it dissolves quicker. It doesn't stick on you as much. You can sit there and shake your head and be like, damn, I'm so glad I'm not them. I'm so glad I'm not them. It must be terrible to be them. You keep it moving mentally. When you understand the power of your mind, that these toxic environments, you have a choice to stay in that toxic mess, to allow it to give you headaches and migraines and make you feel sick and have that cortisol flooding through your body. You'll start making better decisions. When you understand, you won't let that stick on you. Trust and believe. And you'll be working in the background with a smile on your face, because you know the new day is coming. And that new day may take a month. It may take 3 months. It may take 6 months. But do you have it in you to stay the course? Do you have it in you to adjust your resume? Do you have it in you to keep looking and keep adding the amount of applications? See, it's a numbers game. I said this a little bit earlier. It's a numbers game. The more applications you pull out, you send out, the higher your chance of getting hired, right? So if you're only applying for 1 or 2 jobs, you ain't got a chance. You ain't got a chance in hell. Somebody's going to beat you. Somebody's going to send that their application in before you. But if you send out 20, 30, 40, you have a higher chance. Then it's just math. It's just math. So before you step away, you ask yourself, am I doing the math? Am I doing the math? If you're doing the math, then yes, keep doing that math. Keep it, building that network, checking back into your network, updating the resume, tweaking it as you go along. Don't leave a job unless it is so unbearable that you're doing it for your mental health. And then you need to know you're going to be doing a DoorDash, you're going to be doing Walmart delivery, you're going to be doing Amazon, you're going to be driving a cab. If that's what you need to do just to get away from that toxic environment, then do it. But if you can hang, get your house in order. And whilst you are driving a cab or the DoorDash and things like that, be getting your house in order on those hours that you're not. At that point, looking for a job becomes a full-time job. And you should do it with music on in the background. You should do it full of joy because you know you are out of that toxic environment. And for those that are staying in that toxic environment a little bit longer, every time you tweak your resume, all I really want you to be seeing is freedom. Freedom from these toxic fools, from these narcissistic people and narcissistic organizations. Okay? That's where your mind must be at. I am doing these activities without anger, with joy, because I'm going to get the hell out of here, right? This is why you're doing what you're doing, okay? A lot of people get caught up in the emotion. Oh, I got to leave this job. I can't, look at what they're making me do. No. Be thankful that you can actually put together a resume much easier these days. Be thankful that you've got enough work history to find a new job, right? Find the thing in it. Maybe this video is the video that you needed, the encouragement that you needed to step forward in the right type of way. Because I'm going to say it again. If you've been in a toxic environment for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and it's not killing you, but you want out, get your house in order first. I'm going to come back, maybe even later today. No, I won't, because I'm going to a basketball game. I'm going to go see the Wings, Dallas Wings, play women's basketball, so it's going to be exciting. I'm very excited about that. My friend, neighbor, she's invited me, so I'm going to do that. But I will come back over the weekend and just bring some more solutions where, it's going to help you navigate these toxic workplaces, right? I'm going to be doing a 30-day reset to help you get out there and start to change your mindset and regain your confidence, because it does erode your confidence being in these environments. My name is KK Harris. You are watching KK's Career Advice, where I help people navigate in these toxic work environments, with these narcissistic idiots, And I've been doing this thing. I've got over 6,000 to 7,000 coaching hours, my darlings. This is the real deal. If you want to have some more of that, please keep coming back. Watch any of the videos on the platform, and I will see you in the next live. Okay? Please do comment yes, and I'll see you then. Bye for now. We are still learning how to exit. How do we? The big X.